My husband spends every night hanging out with his best friend, but can't stay awake for a single movie night with me. When I told him I felt neglected, he said I was being clingy and controlling. Hello everyone, I never thought I'd be the kind of person to air my relationship struggles like this, but I honestly don't know what else to do. I feel like I'm slowly becoming invisible in my own marriage. My husband, who once couldn't go a day without checking in on me, now spends every single night with his best friend. And when I try to talk to him about it, I'm met with eye rolls, dismissive comments, and accusations that I'm being too needy. I don't think wanting quality time with my husband makes me clingy, but according to him, I should just be more supportive of his friendship. To give some context, my husband and I have been married for 5 years. In the beginning, we were inseparable, late-night talks, spontaneous date nights, and small gestures that made me feel cherished. I never felt like I had to fight for his attention because he made me his priority. But in the past year, everything has changed. Slowly but surely, his best friend has become the center of his world. At first, it was just occasional hangouts after work. Then, it turned into him staying out later and later. Now, it's to the point where I barely see him in the evenings. He comes home exhausted, flops onto the couch, and within minutes, he's asleep. But when it comes to his best friend, he has endless energy to stay out all night. I tried to ignore it at first. I told myself that maybe I was overthinking things. After all, people are allowed to have friendships outside their marriage. But when I realized that we hadn't had a proper date night in months, it hit me. He wasn't just spending time with his friend, he was actively choosing his friend over me. If I suggest a simple movie night at home, he groans, acts disinterested, and dozes off within 10 minutes. Yet, somehow, he can play video games or sit around chatting with his best friend until 2 in the morning, every night without fail. One particularly painful night, I set up a nice dinner at home. I cooked his favorite meal, lit some candles, and put on the movie we had been planning to watch for weeks. I was hoping it would be a small reminder of the connection we used to have. But when he walked through the door, he barely glanced at the setup before saying, "Oh, I'm heading out. Friend's name, wants to hang for a bit." My heart sank. I pointed out that we had planned this night together, that I had gone out of my way to make it special. His response? "We can do it another time. It's not a big deal." But it was a big deal. It was another reminder that no matter what I did, I would always come second to his best friend. I sat at that table alone, pushing food around my plate, feeling foolish for even trying. This pattern continued. Any attempt I made to spend time with him was met with disinterest, while his best friend got his full enthusiasm. I started testing things, suggesting activities I knew he used to love, just to see if he'd say yes. Every time, the answer was some variation of, "I'm too tired, maybe later," or "I just need to unwind after work." Yet, an hour later, he'd be laughing and energized as he left to meet his friend. It was like I didn't exist. I even tried talking to him about it in a calm, reasonable way. One night, as he was getting ready to leave again, I sat him down and said, "I feel like I never see you anymore. It hurts that you have all this energy for your best friend, but not for me." His reaction? A sigh, a shake of the head, and then those infuriating words, "Why are you being so clingy?" I don't see the problem. I just like hanging out with my friend. You should be more supportive instead of trying to control what I do. That moment shattered me. I wasn't trying to control him. I just wanted to be prioritized, to feel like I still mattered to him. Was that really too much to ask? How did we go from being each other's world to me feeling like a nagging afterthought? I started to wonder if I was truly being unreasonable. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe I should just let him have his fun and stop expecting so much from my own husband. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that wasn't fair. Marriage is supposed to be about partnership, about making time for each other, even when life gets busy. And right now, I'm the only one making an effort. I don't know what to do next. I don't want to be the wife who begs for attention, but I also don't want to keep feeling like I'm in a one-sided relationship. I miss my husband. I miss the way things used to be. But if he doesn't even see a problem, how can I make him understand just how much this is breaking my heart? I'm exhausted from trying to compete with a friendship that I should never have to compete with in the first place. Has anyone else been through something like this? Am I truly being unreasonable for wanting my husband to spend more time with me? Or is this the beginning of something much worse? After that conversation, I tried to push my feelings down. I told myself that maybe I was overreacting, that I needed to be more understanding. Maybe if I stopped bringing it up, he would naturally start spending more time with me again. But the more I suppressed my emotions, the more resentment started building up inside me. It was like I was watching my own marriage slip through my fingers, and the worst part was that my husband didn't even seem to notice. The next few weeks were more of the same. Every evening, he'd rush through dinner or skip it entirely, barely giving me a second glance before heading out the door. When I asked where he was going, the answer was always the same. Just hanging out with friend's name, I won't be long. But long turned into hours, sometimes past midnight. I started sleeping alone more nights than not, waking up to find him passed out on the couch after finally coming home. I tried again to bring it up, this time more gently. One morning, as he groggily made his way to the kitchen, I said, "Hey, do you think we could plan something together this weekend? Just us." He didn't even look up from his phone as he muttered, "I'll see if I'm free." That was it. No enthusiasm, no effort, not even an acknowledgement that he had been neglecting our relationship. That phrase, "here we go again," made something in me snap. Yes, here we go again. Because this is an actual problem, and you refuse to even acknowledge it. You spend every night with him. Every single night. I'm your wife, and I feel like a stranger in my own home. His expression darkened. I don't see why this is such a big deal. I need time to unwind, and hanging out with him helps me relax. Why can't you just let me have that? Because you don't give me anything. I shouted. You don't talk to me. You don't spend time with me. You barely even look at me anymore. How is that normal in a marriage? He scoffed. Oh, so I'm supposed to just sit here with you every night and do whatever you want? That's not fair. I have a life outside of this house, you know. His words hit me like a slap. A life outside of this house. As if our marriage, our home, I was just something he tolerated in between his real life with his best friend. I'm not saying you can't have friends, I said, my voice shaking. I'm saying I should matter too. Do I even matter to you anymore? That was the moment I realized how far gone we were. Because instead of reassuring me, instead of showing any sign that he understood how much pain he was causing me, he just shook his head and said, "I can't deal with this right now," before grabbing his keys and walking out. And just like that, he chose his best friend over me again. I stood there, staring at the door, feeling the weight of all my efforts crashing down on me. I had tried everything: patience, understanding, communication, even giving him space. Nothing worked. He didn't want to fix this because, in his mind, there was nothing to fix. That night, I didn't wait up for him. I didn't check my phone, didn't wonder what time he'd be home. Instead, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out what I was supposed to do next. Because at this point, I wasn't just hurt anymore. I was starting to question if I even had a place in my own marriage. The next few days passed in a blur. I stopped trying. Stopped asking him to spend time with me. Stopped waiting for him to come home. It was as if something inside me had finally shut down. And you know what? He didn't even notice. If anything, he seemed relieved. Without me bringing up our issues, he went about his life as if everything was fine. The late nights with his best friend continued. The excuses kept coming. The emotional distance between us grew wider. And I just let it happen. I thought maybe, if I pulled away, he'd realize something was wrong. Maybe he'd finally look at me and see the woman he promised to love and cherish. But that moment never came. Instead, the more I detached, the more obvious it became he had already moved on emotionally. One night, I heard him laughing on the phone in the other room, making plans yet again. Something in me snapped. I walked in and said, "I need to know something." He barely looked up. "What? Do you even love me anymore?" My voice was steady, but my heart was pounding. That finally got his attention. He furrowed his brows, like the question had caught him off guard. "What kind of question is that?" "A real one," I said. "Because I don't feel loved. I don't feel like I'm your wife." I feel like a roommate you barely tolerate. He sighed. You're being dramatic again. That word, dramatic. I had poured my heart out, and that was all he had to say. Forget it, I said, turning to walk away. But before I could leave the room, he muttered under his breath, maybe you should stop obsessing over me and find your own life. I stopped cold. For a moment, I thought I had misheard. But when I turned back, his expression was completely indifferent. That was it. The moment I knew I was done, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stared at him, realizing that the man I had married no longer existed. Or maybe he had never been the person I thought he was. I went to bed that night with an eerie sense of clarity. I had spent so long begging for his attention, for him to see me, when the truth was right in front of me the whole time. He didn't care. And if he didn't care, why was I still fighting? The next morning, I made a decision. I wasn't going to beg anymore. I wasn't going to wait around, hoping he would wake up one day and remember that he had a wife. I was going to choose myself. I didn't pack my bags that day, but I started planning. Looking at my finances. Considering my options. Thinking about what my life could be if I stopped settling for someone who treated me like a burden instead of a partner. The saddest part? He didn't even notice the shift. Maybe one day, he'll come home and realize I'm not waiting up for him anymore. Maybe he'll look around and see that I'm not there at all. And maybe then, just maybe, he'll finally understand what he lost. But by then, it will be too late.